A black belt thug mocks an old man after catching him stopping a brutal attack on a helpless teenager at the martial arts studio. The sadistic instructor Rex thinks he's found an easy target, some aging Asian guy who doesn't know his place in the modern world. He shoves the quiet stranger and starts making racist jokes about kung fu movies, not realizing he's about to learn the difference between real martial arts and Hollywood fantasy. But what this arrogant bully doesn't know is that the unassuming man he's taunting is Donnie Yen himself. The legendary fighter who's spent decades mastering Wing Chun and mixed martial arts stands perfectly still as Rex threatens him, his calm more terrifying than any scream of rage. The black belt has no idea he just challenged a man who can end fights in 3 moves or less. While Rex flexes for his terrified students, the martial arts master calculates exactly how to dismantle this predator without breaking a sweat. The teenager Rex was torturing watches in amazement as his unlikely savior prepares to show what real strength looks like. What happens when a fake tough guy meets a true legend? Will Rex survive discovering why some masters never need to prove themselves? What happened next would shatter the bully's ego for the rest of his pathetic life. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The weathered Honda Civic pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Commons with the quiet efficiency of a vehicle that had seen better days but still served its purpose faithfully. Donnie stepped out, his movements fluid despite the simple gray t-shirt and worn jeans that made him look like any other middle-aged man running afternoon errands. The California sun cast long shadows across the strip mall's cracked asphalt, where teenagers streamed toward the glass storefront marked Blackstone Martial Arts in bold black letters. He'd only come for dry cleaning, but something in the scene through the large window made him pause. Inside the studio, a class was in session, and even from the parking lot, the dynamics were all wrong. Donnie had spent decades in martial arts schools across the world. He knew the difference between discipline and cruelty, between teaching and breaking. The instructor circled a thin teenager like a predator sizing up wounded prey. Rex Vandenberg stood 6'2" with the kind of muscular build that filled rooms with aggressive energy, his multiple black belts displayed prominently on the wall behind him like hunting trophies. The boy he'd targeted, Kevin Morrison, though Donnie didn't know his name yet, struggled with basic cutoff forms, his movements tentative and fearful. Morrison, Rex's voice carried clearly through the glass. You call that a stance? My grandmother could fight better than you, and she's been dead for 10 years. The other students, a college-aged girl with red hair, a younger Asian boy, and a blonde high school senior, watch with the uncomfortable mixture of sympathy and relief that comes from knowing you're not today's target. They'd all been where Kevin stood, Donnie realized. They all knew what came next, that Kevin's white GI hung loose on his slight frame, making him look even more vulnerable as he tried desperately to correct his form. His thick-rimmed glasses kept sliding down his nose, fogging with the kind of nervous sweat that comes from genuine fear rather than physical exertion. At 17, he should have been building confidence through martial arts training. Instead, each correction seemed to diminish him further. Donnie collected his dry cleaning but didn't get back in his car. Something about the boy's hunched shoulders and downcast eyes triggered every protective instinct he developed over 6 decades of life. This wasn't teaching. It was systematic psychological abuse disguised as martial arts instruction. Through the window, he watched Rex position Kevin at the center of the mat, forcing him into a horse stance while the other students formed a reluctant circle. The instructor's smile had nothing to do with education and everything to do with the sadistic pleasure of having absolute power over someone weaker. Rex began his correction by pushing Kevin's shoulders down with unnecessary force, then yanking his arms into unnatural positions. When the boy winced, Rex loudly proclaimed this was character building and that real martial artists don't whine about discomfort. The lesson was becoming something darker, more dangerous. Donnie set down his dry cleaning on the Honda's hood. Rex's voice rose sharply again, and this time, don't embarrass yourself. Kevin's legs trembled from pain and fear as he tried to resume the stance, his whole body shaking with the effort of not crying. That's when Donnie made his decision. Some things couldn't be ignored, regardless of the consequences. The studio's Front door chimed softly as Donnie entered, but the sound was lost beneath Rex's increasingly harsh criticism. The instructor had Kevin locked in what he called a teaching grip, actually a modified armbar that put dangerous pressure on the teenager's elbow joint. Kevin's face cycled from white to red as he fought desperately not to cry out, his glasses fogging with tears he refused to let fall. Weakness must be burned out, Rex announced to his captive audience, gradually increasing the pressure while Kevin bit his lip hard enough to draw blood. This is what separates real warriors from pretenders. Lisa. Garrett looked away, unable to watch anymore. Tommy Wu started to step forward, but Brad Collins held him back with a subtle shake of his head. They'd all learned that interfering only made Rex's cruelty worse. The studio that should have been a place of growth and empowerment had become a theater for systematic psychological torture. Rex released Kevin's arm with a sharp push that sent the boy stumbling backward. Again, he barked. And this time, don't embarrass yourself in front of your classmates. Kevin shakily tried to resume his horse stance, but his legs trembled uncontrollably from the combination of physical pain and emotional trauma. His parents had paid for 6 months of classes up front, hoping martial arts would build their shy son's confidence. Instead, Kevin had grown more withdrawn each week, too ashamed to admit to Robert and Janet Morrison that he wanted to quit. The other students pressed against the walls, their own experiences having taught them to become invisible when Rex entered. His darker moods. They'd all suffered similar corrections at various points, each session designed to break down their self-esteem and rebuild it according to Rex's twisted philosophy of dominance through fear. Rex circled Kevin like a shark, sensing blood in the water. Since you can't seem to master a basic stance, maybe we need to try a different approach to your education. He raised his hand toward Kevin's face in what was clearly going to be more than a demonstration. The other students watched in horror. This had gone far beyond any training they'd witnessed before. Rex's open palm descended toward Kevin's cheek with deliberate malice, the kind of calculated humiliation designed to shatter whatever remained of a vulnerable teenager's self-worth. Kevin flinched, eyes squeezed shut, waiting for the impact that would complete his transformation from struggling student to broken victim. In that frozen moment of anticipated violence, with Rex's hand still descending and the other students too terrified to intervene, time seemed suspended between cruelty and consequences. The blow never landed. Instead, Kevin heard a brief scuffle, a surprised grunt from Rex, and then sudden silence. When he opened his eyes, his tormentor was face down on the mat, his arm controlled in a joint lock so subtle that none of them understood how he'd gotten there. Standing over Rex was the middle-aged Asian man who'd entered so quietly that his presence had gone unnoticed until he chose to act. Perhaps, Donnie said calmly. The young man needs a moment to recover his breath. Rex struggled against the hold for several seconds before Donnie released him and stepped back, hands open and non-threatening. The instructor scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with the kind of rage that comes from being humiliated in front of subordinates. He'd never been handled so easily, especially not by someone who looked so unremarkable. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside," Rex said, his voice cracking slightly as he tried to reassert authority over his own studio. "We don't allow spectators during advanced training sessions." Donnie's expression remained perfectly calm. "I understand your dedication to excellence, but true strength comes from building students up, not breaking them down." Rex's face darkened at what he perceived as a challenge to his methods. Here was some concerned parent, Asian, middle-aged, probably another tiger dad worried about his kids' training getting too intense. Rex had dealt with dozens of them over the years, and they all backed down once he explained the realities of serious martial arts instruction. "Are you telling me how to run my school?" Rex stepped closer, using his size advantage to intimidate. "Do you have any idea what level of black belt I am? What I've achieved in this art?" The students watched from their positions against the walls, sensing a shift in the room's dynamic, but not understanding what they were witnessing. Lisa noticed something different about how the stranger carried himself, a stillness that seemed more like coiled energy than passivity. Tommy recognized the way the man's weight was distributed, perfectly balanced despite his casual stance. "I can see that you're skilled," Donnie replied quietly. "But skill without wisdom becomes cruelty. And cruelty isn't strength, it's weakness disguised as power." Rex's professional patience evaporated. This nobody was lecturing him about martial arts philosophy in front of his students, undermining months of careful conditioning designed to break down their resistance to his methods. He placed a heavy hand on Donnie's shoulder and gave him a firm shove toward the door. I think you'd better leave before I have to escort you out personally. The shove was harder than necessary, Rex testing boundaries, showing dominance, proving to his students that their instructor wouldn't be intimidated by some aging idealist with outdated notions about gentle training. The message was clear. This is what happens to people who question my authority. Donnie absorbed the impact without moving more than a single step, his balance perfect, his expression unchanged. But something subtle shifted in his posture. Settling into stance that spoke of decades spent mastering the principles Rex had corrupted for his own ego. Rex misread Donnie's stillness as submission and turned back to Kevin with renewed aggression. The interruption had cost him face in front of his students, and someone would pay for that embarrassment. Since your friend here thinks I'm being too hard on you, he announced, let's show him what real training looks like. He raised his open palm toward Kevin's face, the threat clear and immediate. This wouldn't be instruction or correction. It would be punishment delivered to reassert dominance over both the terrified teenager and the unwelcome observer who dared question his methods. Time slowed as Rex's hand began its descent, Kevin's eyes squeezing shut in anticipation of pain, and the other students watching in frozen horror at the escalation they were powerless to prevent. That's when Donnie moved. The sequence unfolded in less than 3 seconds, but each movement demonstrated a different aspect of Wing Chun mastery that Rex's aggressive style couldn't comprehend or counter. First came the pack saw, a slapping block that intercepted Rex's descending arm and redirected its force, while Donnie simultaneously stepped into striking range. The technique was so smooth it looked choreographed, but the power behind it was devastatingly real. Rex found his strike not just blocked, but completely controlled. His momentum turned against him as Donnie's second movement flowed seamlessly from the first. The chi saw technique, sticky hands that maintained contact while manipulating an opponent's balance, used Rex's own aggressive energy to turn him off balance. The larger man's strength became a liability as Donnie guided it in directions Rex hadn't intended. The final movement was almost gentle in its execution but irresistible in its effect. A perfectly timed tan saw, palm-up deflection, combined with precise footwork that positioned Rex's weight over his own feet in the worst possible way. The instructor's superior size and strength meant nothing when basic physics worked against him, sending him face down onto his own mat. The teenagers stared in stunned silence. Lisa's mouth hung open as she processed what she'd just witnessed. Tommy unconsciously took a step backward, his analytical mind trying to understand techniques his limited training hadn't prepared him to recognize. Brad whispered, "Holy shit," under his breath, the words barely audible but perfectly capturing everyone's reaction. Kevin remained frozen in his horse stance, blinking in confusion behind his fogged glasses. One moment he'd been about to receive a blow that would shatter what remained of his confidence. The next, his tormentor lay controlled on the mat by someone who'd moved with such casual precision that the violence looked almost like dancing. Rex struggled against the joint lock that held him, his face pressed against the canvas while his arm was controlled in a grip so subtle he couldn't understand the mechanics of his immobilization. Donnie had applied just enough pressure to completely neutralize resistance without causing injury. A demonstration of perfect control that showcased not just technical skill, but decades of experience in knowing exactly how much force was necessary. "Let me go," Rex gasped, humiliation and bewilderment mixing in his voice. He'd trained for years, earned legitimate black belts in multiple disciplines, built a reputation based on his ability to dominate others through superior technique and psychological intimidation. Being handled like a novice by someone who looked like any other middle-aged civilian shattered his entire understanding of his place in the martial arts hierarchy. Donnie released him and stepped back, hands returning to the open, non-threatening position that had preceded his intervention. Rex scrambled to his feet, face flushed with embarrassment and rage, his carefully maintained aura of invincibility shattered in front of the students whose fear had been his primary source of power and control. The instructor rolled his shoulders and cracked his knuckles, trying to reassert his physical presence through intimidation. But his students had seen something they'd never witnessed before. Rex completely outclassed by someone who fought with principles rather than aggression, technique rather than brutality, wisdom rather than mere strength. You want to play games? Old man. Rex's voice cracked slightly with suppressed rage. Let's see how tough you are when it's not a sucker punch. Rex circled Donnie like a caged animal, his professional demeanor completely abandoned. The students pressed themselves against the studio walls, sensing the dangerous shift from training session to something far more volatile. Rex rolled his shoulders and shadowboxed, trying to reclaim his dominance through raw physical intimidation. What's next, old-timer? Rex began, his voice dripping with calculated mockery. Gonna break out the nunchucks? Maybe do some of those flying kicks like in the movies. He performed an exaggerated kung fu pose, complete with dramatic sound effects that made several students laugh nervously. The racial stereotyping escalated as Rex affected an offensive accent. Ancient Chinese secret, yes? Very wise warrior from mystical mountain temple. His crew of students shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the ugliness beneath their instructor's performance, but too intimidated to object. But Rex's confidence returned as he played to his audience. I bet you've never been in a real fight in your life. All that movie kung fu doesn't work against someone who actually knows how to fight. He threw a few aggressive combinations at the air, showing off his legitimate Muay Thai skills for the teenagers who'd only ever seen him brutalize much weaker opponents. Throughout the verbal assault, Donnie remained perfectly composed. His hands stayed relaxed at his sides, his breathing steady and controlled. When Rex finished his racist performance art, Donnie spoke quietly. I'm not here to fight you. I just want to make sure the young man is safe. This calm response infuriated Rex further. He'd expected either cowering submission or angry retaliation, both reactions he knew how to exploit. Instead, he faced someone whose serenity suggested depths of confidence Rex couldn't fathom or intimidate. You think you're some kind of hero? Rex snarled. Some righteous defender swooping in to save the day? Let me tell you something about the real world. Grandpa, the strong survive and the weak get crushed. That's nature. Rex described the proving grounds with the enthusiasm of someone recruiting for his favorite cause. He painted it as an underground venue where real martial artists tested themselves against worthy opponents, where authentic warriors proved their worth through uncompromising combat. You want to prove all that fancy footwork wasn't just luck. Rex's grin turned predatory as he issued his formal challenge. Meet me there Friday night. Unless you're too scared to face someone who actually fights back instead of defenseless. Kids. Donnie looked around the room at the frightened students, his gaze lingering on Kevin, who still trembled from his earlier ordeal. What about them? He asked quietly, his concern for the teenagers evident in every word. Rex's smile widened with malicious satisfaction. Oh, they'll be there to watch their hero get what he deserves. Assuming he's man enough to show up, of course. The threat was implicit but crystal clear. The student's safety was now tied to Donnie's response to the challenge. The studio fell silent except for the sound of Kevin's labored breathing and the distant traffic from the strip mall parking lot. Rex stood with his arms crossed, confident he'd maneuvered his opponent into an impossible position. Rex stormed out of his own studio, shouting over his shoulder about Friday night and teaching respect to old fools. The heavy door slammed behind him with enough force to rattle the windows, leaving the students frozen against the walls until the sound of his car engine faded from the parking lot. Donnie immediately went to Kevin, who remained locked in his painful horse stance, legs shaking from exhaustion and trauma. Easy, Donnie said gently, helping the teenager to his feet with careful hands that checked for injury from Rex's earlier joint manipulation. Kevin's arm was sore and would show bruises tomorrow, but Donnie's timely intervention had prevented serious damage. The other students gathered around cautiously, drawn by curiosity about their unexpected savior, but still processing the violence they'd witnessed. Lisa Garrett was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. Who are you? Instead of answering directly, Donnie focused on Kevin's condition, examining the teenager's elbow and shoulder where Rex had applied his teaching grip. The boy's glasses were still fogged with tears he'd refused to let fall, his thin frame shaking from more than just physical exhaustion. "I'm okay," Kevin managed, though his voice betrayed the lie. He does that sometimes. Says it builds character." "No," Donnie replied firmly. "What he does is abuse. Character comes from overcoming challenges with support and guidance, not from being broken down by someone who should protect you." One by one, the students began sharing their stories. Lisa revealed she was a college freshman who joined hoping to learn self-defense after a campus incident, but found herself trapped by Rex's psychological manipulation and her parents' financial investment in the 6-month program. Tommy Wu, the youngest at 16, had been enrolled by traditional parents who believed martial arts would teach discipline. Instead, he developed anxiety attacks before each class, his grades suffering as he dreaded the twice-weekly sessions that left him feeling worthless and afraid. Brad Collins admitted he'd initially thrived under Rex's aggressive approach, drawn by the promise of becoming stronger and more dominant. But gradually he'd realized he was being trained to become a bully like his instructor, turning him into someone he didn't recognize or respect. That Kevin's revelation was the most troubling. His father, Detective Robert Morrison, had been investigating a series of missing teenagers from troubled backgrounds. Kevin was actually placed in Rex's class as part of an unofficial investigation. His father suspected the martial arts studio of being connected to the disappearances, but needed inside information. "Several former students just vanished," Kevin explained, his analytical mind working despite his emotional state. "Officially, they're runaways, but the pattern's too consistent. Rex targets kids with problems, breaks them down, then they disappear." As the group processed this information, Kevin checked his phone and went pale. "My dad was supposed to pick me up an hour ago. He never misses pickup time. Never." Donnie's expression grew serious as he realized the stakes might be higher than simple bullying. Through the studio window, they could see Rex's car parked across the street, engine running, clearly watching and waiting. The studio felt suddenly cold and empty, shadows lengthening as afternoon became evening. Donnie drove Kevin home in his Honda Civic while the other students followed in Lisa's car, their small convoy moving through increasingly upscale neighborhoods toward the Morrison family's modest 2-story house. Kevin directed him through quiet streets lined with mature oak trees, his nervousness increasing with each turn. "All the lights are off," Kevin observed as they pulled into the driveway. "Mom should be home from her teaching job by now. She always has dinner started when Dad gets home from his shift." They found Janet Morrison pacing frantically in her kitchen, phone pressed to her ear as she left another voicemail for her missing husband. Her graying brown hair was disheveled, her usually neat teacher's attire wrinkled from hours of anxious waiting. Detective Robert Morrison had never returned from his shift and wasn't answering his radio or cell phone, behavior completely out of character for a man who checked in religiously with his family. "It's not like him," Janet repeated, her voice strained with worry. 23 years married, and he's never just disappeared. Even when he's working undercover, he finds ways to let me know he's safe." In Robert's home office, they discovered files that painted a disturbing picture across 3 counties. 12 teenagers from broken homes had disappeared over the past 18 months, all connected to martial arts, boxing, or self-defense programs before vanishing. The missing persons reports showed a clear pattern that local authorities had failed to recognize or investigate properly. Robert's research revealed that the proving grounds wasn't just Rex's boastful name for an underground fighting venue. It was the visible tip of a recruitment network that identified vulnerable youth through various programs, then gradually introduced them to special training that served as grooming for wealthy clients who paid to watch brutal exhibitions. Kevin showed Donnie his father's laptop, which contained encrypted communications Robert had been monitoring for weeks. The last message, sent just hours earlier, mentioned a demonstration featuring a special guest scheduled for Friday night. The timing matched Rex's challenge to Donnie perfectly, too perfectly to be coincidental. "Dad was getting close to something big," Kevin explained, his voice steadying as he processed the evidence with his father's analytical training. He said the martial arts schools were just the recruitment layer for something much worse. The files contained photographs, financial records, and witness statements that revealed a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Young people were systematically identified, psychologically broken, then either recruited as enforcers or sold to clients for various horrific purposes. The operation had tentacles reaching into multiple states and international markets. As they examined Robert's research, car headlights swept across the house's front windows. Janet peered through the curtains and gasped. Two unmarked sedans sat in the street with engines running, their occupants clearly watching the Morrison residence. "That's not police," Janet whispered, her teacher's instinct for recognizing danger, keeping her voice low. Through the window, they could count at least 6 figures positioned around the property, 2 professional to be random criminals, 2 coordinated to be improvised surveillance. Kevin grabbed his father's backup service weapon from the desk drawer, his hands shaking but his resolve firm. "They know we found something." The Morrison house was completely surrounded. Donnie counted at least 6 figures positioned strategically around the property, professionals who moved with military precision rather than the sloppy enthusiasm of street criminals. Their vehicles blocked both ends of the residential street, creating an effective containment perimeter that spoke of extensive planning and resources. Janet Morrison clutched her son while Lisa, Tommy, and Brad huddled together in the living room, their adventure suddenly transformed into a life-threatening nightmare. The teenagers who'd thought they were escaping Rex's abuse now found themselves trapped in something far more dangerous and sophisticated. Donnie's phone rang with an unknown number. Rex's voice carried smug confidence when he answered. "Enjoying your little investigation, movie star? Your cop friend got a little too curious for his own good. Don't worry, he's alive. For now." The revelation hit like ice water. Rex knew exactly who Donnie was, had known from the moment he'd entered the studio. The entire confrontation, the racist mockery, the physical challenge, even the underground fighting invitation, had been orchestrated to draw the legendary martial artist into their web. "You see, we've been watching Detective Morrison's investigation for months," Rex continued, his earlier crude persona replaced by cold professionalism. "When he placed his son in my program, we realized we had an opportunity to acquire something much more valuable than another broken teenager." Rex explained that Donnie had become the main attraction for the network's biggest event ever. Wealthy clients had paid premium prices to watch the legendary martial artist fight for real stakes, with betting pools reaching into the millions. The underground fighting circuit had evolved into something far more sinister, live entertainment where failure meant death. "The rules are simple," Rex continued. "You come alone to the designated location Friday night. You'll face 3 opponents in succession, win all 3 fights, and everyone goes free. Detective Morrison, his family, all the pretty students. Lose even one, and they all disappear forever into our client network." Janet Morrison's face went white as the implications became clear. Kevin gripped his father's weapon tighter. Though they all knew 6 teenagers and 1 middle-aged teacher couldn't fight their way out of a professional surveillance operation that Rex's voice carried through the house's smart speaker system. They'd been hacked and monitored throughout their investigation. "The fights will be broadcast live to paying clients worldwide. Our subscribers have paid extraordinary sums to watch either your victory or your destruction, preferably the latter." Kevin revealed he'd been carrying something crucial, a small digital recorder his father had given him containing weeks of undercover audio from various martial arts schools. The evidence could bring down the entire network, but only if they survived long enough to use it. "You have exactly 48 hours to prepare, Donnie," came Rex's final message through their compromised electronics. "And don't think about running. We'll find you anywhere. Besides, you're not the type to abandon innocent people, are you? That's what makes you such a perfect hero and such an easy target." The surveillance vehicles pulled away as suddenly as they'd arrived, leaving the Morrison house in darkness. But everyone inside knew they remained under observation through methods they couldn't detect or counter. Donnie stood at the window, his reflection showing a man who'd fought countless battles on screen but now faced his most dangerous opponent. A system designed to turn strength into weakness and heroes into victims. Friday night was 36 hours away. Friday night, 11:47 p.m. Donnie followed GPS coordinates that led him through increasingly desolate industrial areas of Riverside, past abandoned factories and empty lots where streetlights cast sickly yellow pools in the darkness. His Honda Civic looked pathetic among the expensive cars already parked in the shadows around a massive warehouse complex. Bentleys, Ferraris, and armored SUVs that spoke of wealth and paranoia in equal measure. Armed guards materialized from the darkness at multiple checkpoints, their movements professional and courteous despite the assault rifles slung across their chests. They checked the electronic invitation Rex had sent to Donnie's phone, their scanners reading encrypted data that granted access to what was clearly a well-funded operation with international reach. Inside the warehouse, the proving grounds revealed itself as far more sophisticated than Donnie had imagined. A professional-grade fighting arena occupied the center of the space, surrounded by tiered VIP seating that could accommodate hundreds of spectators. Multiple camera angles captured every inch of the fighting cage, feeding high-definition streams to remote locations where additional clients watched from the comfort of their private estates. The audience was a disturbing mix of wealth and corruption, business leaders whose faces graced magazine covers, politicians whose campaigns promoted family values, celebrities whose public personas would never survive association with this underground brutality. They'd paid six-figure sums to witness live violence, their excited chatter revealing the sophisticated betting pools that made this evening's entertainment worth millions in wagered money. Miranda Blackstone emerged from a private elevator, her presence commanding immediate attention from both staff and spectators. At 43, she maintained the athletic grace of her Olympic training days, moving with controlled precision that spoke of someone accustomed to absolute authority. Her silver-streaked black hair was pulled back severely, framing sharp features, and cold eyes that evaluated everything as potential assets or threats. "Welcome to the real Olympics," Miranda announced to the crowd, her voice carrying easily through the arena's sound system. "Tonight we discover whether legends can survive reality, whether movie magic translates to genuine violence." She gestured toward massive screens showing the imprisoned victims. Detective Morrison chained in an underground cell, his face battered but his eyes still defiant. Kevin, Lisa, Tommy, and Brad huddled together in a separate holding area, their terror obvious but their resolve unbroken. Miranda explained the true purpose of the evening to both live and remote audiences. This wasn't just entertainment. It was a recruitment demonstration, a showcase for the network's ability to acquire and control even legendary figures. Donnie's participation, willing or forced, would legitimize their operation in the eyes of international clients seeking similar services. 3 fights await our legend, Miranda announced as arena lights blazed to life and the crowd settled into their premium seats. Each victory earns freedom for one group of prisoners. But failure? She smiled coldly as the cameras focused on the captives. Failure means they join our permanent collection as training materials for discerning clients. The arena announcer's voice boomed with practiced enthusiasm. "Ladies and gentlemen, presenting tonight's first challenger, Rex Vandenberg." The crowd erupted as their evening's entertainment officially began. Rex emerged from the fighter's tunnel, transformed from the martial arts instructor persona he'd worn at the studio. Gone was the facade of legitimate teaching. He now appeared in his true element, wearing professional fight gear that displayed an impressive physique covered in scars from countless previous battles. His black belts hadn't been lies, just camouflage, for something far more dangerous and sophisticated. Miranda stepped into the arena's center, her voice carrying to both the bloodthirsty live audience and the remote viewers whose payments had funded this elaborate spectacle. She outlined rules designed to showcase different aspects of combat while maximizing the entertainment value for their wealthy clientele. "Our first contest will demonstrate traditional martial arts mastery," she announced, gesturing toward Rex, who shadowboxed for the cameras. Striking and grappling with minimal restrictions, allowing both fighters to display their authentic skills without the safety limitations of regulated competition. Massive monitors around the arena displayed the imprisoned victims in high definition, making the stakes viscerally real for everyone watching. Detective Morrison appeared on screen first, his police training evident in the way he maintained composure despite his chains and injuries. Then Kevin's face filled the screens, the teenager clearly forced to deliver a message he'd been made to memorize. "If you lose, it's our fault for getting you involved. Don't hold back trying to protect us." His voice cracked with emotion, but his underlying message was clear. He understood the stakes and trusted Donnie to do whatever was necessary. Rex addressed the crowd with the confidence of a practiced performer, revealing that his Blackstone martial arts studio was merely one recruitment center in a network spanning multiple states. His job involved identifying potential fighters and victims among vulnerable youth, using psychological manipulation to break down their resistance. Before introducing them to the network's true purposes, Detective Morrison thought he was hunting us, Rex announced to appreciative laughter from the audience. Instead, he delivered his own son into our hands and created the perfect leverage to acquire tonight's main attraction. Rex's technical preparation became a brutal demonstration as he destroyed training dummies with combinations that showcased legitimate Muay Thai expertise honed through years of underground fighting. The crowd roared approval at each devastating strike, their bloodlust building toward the main event they'd paid fortunes to witness. Between Rex's warm-up displays, Donnie was allowed basic fight gear, but nothing that would provide significant advantage. The rules favored aggression over technique, raw power over defensive precision, designed to showcase the kind of violence their clients craved rather than the artistic mastery that defined authentic martial arts. Miranda revealed Rex's deeper motivation through overhead conversation. His younger brother had been one of the network's early victims, broken and discarded when he couldn't meet their performance standards. Rex's cruelty stemmed from twisted logic that proving himself stronger than the system that destroyed his family would somehow restore meaning to his life. Even as he perpetuated the same cycle of abuse, as crowd excitement reached fever pitch. Miranda raised her hand for silence. Any last words before we see if movie magic translates to real violence? Arena lights focused on the fighting cage as the first battle prepared to begin, with millions of dollars riding on whether a legend could survive reality. The cage door clanged shut with metallic finality. Rex bounced on his toes, shadowboxing, and feeding off the crowd's energy while playing to cameras that broadcast his confidence to remote viewers worldwide. Donnie stood quietly in his corner, eyes closed, centering himself through breathing techniques learned over decades of authentic martial arts training. The contrast between showmanship and preparation couldn't have been starker. Rex charged forward immediately when the bell sounded, using his size and aggression to seize initiative before his opponent could establish rhythm or distance. His opening combination, a feint followed by a devastating Muay Thai knee strike, represented the kind of overwhelming assault that ended most fights within seconds. But Donnie's Wing Chun training allowed him to redirect Rex's momentum while staying inside his reach, transforming the larger man's aggressive energy into a liability rather than an advantage. The pack-saw technique that intercepted Rex's initial attack flowed seamlessly into positioning that left Donnie closer rather than farther from his opponent. Exactly where Wing Chun's close-range mastery was most effective, the battle showcased fundamental philosophical differences between their approaches to combat. Rex fought with pure aggression, throwing powerful strikes designed to overwhelm and intimidate opponents through superior strength and conditioning. His technique was legitimate but crude, relying on physical advantages rather than tactical sophistication. Donnie responded with efficient counters that demonstrated why Wing Chun had survived centuries of evolution. Each pack-saw and lop-saw technique controlled Rex's arms while delivering precise strikes to nerve points that gradually sapped his opponent's strength. The larger man's power meant nothing when it couldn't reach its intended targets. The audience's bloodthirsty cheers gradually quieted as they witnessed something unexpected, technical mastery overcoming brute force through principles rather than strength. Donnie's movements had an almost hypnotic quality, each technique flowing seamlessly into the next with economy of motion that turned defense into offense without visible transition. Rex realized he was being outclassed and abandoned martial arts entirely in favor of street fighting tactics. Eye gouges, groin strikes, and attempts to slam Donnie against the cage walls revealed his desperation as legitimate technique failed against superior understanding of combat principles. Each dirty move was countered with surgical precision that demonstrated not just technical skill but moral superiority. Donnie could have responded with equal brutality, but chose to maintain the ethical standards that separated martial arts from mere violence. The finishing sequence came when Rex attempted a wild haymaker powered by pure frustration rather than technique. Donnie stepped into the punch with a bong saw block that redirected the force upward, while his simultaneous hand saw and foot sweep sent Rex crashing to the mat with devastating effectiveness. The gentle but irresistible submission hold ended the fight without serious injury, demonstrating perfect control over both technique and temperament. As Rex tapped out, gasping for breath, Donnie helped him to his feet with genuine respect for a defeated opponent who'd fought with everything he had. The crowd's reaction mixed appreciation for technical mastery with disappointment at the lack of blood they'd expected. Miranda's voice cut through the noise. Impressive, but that was merely the appetizer. Release the first group as promised. Through the monitors, they watched Kevin, Lisa, Tommy, and Brad being escorted to freedom, though Detective Morrison and other captives remained chained for the trials ahead. During the 15-minute break between fights, guards escorted Donnie to a holding area where he was allowed water and basic medical attention. His first battle had been technically perfect, but Rex's desperate tactics had left several minor cuts and bruises that would accumulate over the course of 3 fights. More concerning was the energy expenditure. Maintaining perfect control while absorbing Rex's aggressive attacks had been mentally and physically draining. The holding area contained other captive fighters, men and women of various ages who'd been broken by the system and now served as training partners for wealthy clients seeking authentic martial arts experiences. Their hollow eyes and mechanical movements spoke of systematic psychological conditioning designed to strip away resistance and independent thought. Among them was Jake Patterson, a 28-year-old man whose military bearing remained evident. Despite his circumstances, his short brown hair and hazel eyes showed the strain of someone living a double life. But his approach to Donnie seemed genuine, a fellow victim seeking connection with someone who might understand his situation. Jake revealed his apparent background as a military veteran whose PTSD made him vulnerable to the network's recruitment tactics. Returning from deployment with severe trauma symptoms, he'd struggled to access proper treatment through official channels that seemed designed to process rather than heal damaged soldiers. They found me at a veteran support group, Jake explained, his voice carrying the weight of authentic pain. Promised camaraderie and purpose through security work. By the time I realized the truth, they had enough leverage to keep me trapped, dead, compromising photos, threats against people I cared about. Through Jake and other prisoners, Donnie learned about the network's sophisticated methodology. They targeted individuals with specific vulnerabilities, troubled teenagers, veterans with PTSD, desperate immigrants, anyone without strong family connections. The martial arts schools represented just one recruitment vector among many others designed to cast wide nets for potential victims. Jake provided crucial intelligence about the facility's security weaknesses and the psychological profiles of Donnie's remaining opponents. His information revealed that Detective Morrison's investigation had been more extensive than anyone realized, involving federal agents tracking money flows and identifying high-level clients across multiple jurisdictions. Your cop friend was getting close to something that scared them, Jake whispered urgently. The network's response, kidnapping a police detective, represents a dangerous escalation that means they're planning to abandon this location after tonight. The bond forming between Donnie and Jake seemed natural, based on mutual respect and shared understanding of what it meant to protect others despite personal cost. Jake's apparent military background and genuine concern for fellow prisoners made him a valuable ally in hostile territory. As guards arrived to escort Donnie back to the arena for his second fight, Jake gripped his arm with desperate intensity. There's something you need to know about the final opponent, he whispered with urgency that seemed completely authentic. The champion isn't just skilled, they've broken him completely inside, turned him into something that doesn't feel pain or mercy anymore. You'll be fighting a machine that used to be human. Arena lights beckoned as the crowd grew restless for the evening's next installment of violence, their bloodlust building toward levels that demanded increasingly brutal entertainment. The arena had been reconfigured for the second fight, transformed into something resembling a medieval armory. Weapon racks lined the walls, containing everything from traditional martial arts implements to improvised tools of violence. Eskrima sticks, nunchucks, chains, batons, and objects that had no legitimate training purpose but existed solely to inflict maximum damage on human flesh. The crowd's energy had shifted from excited anticipation to bloodthirsty hunger. The first fight's technical mastery had impressed them, but they'd paid extraordinary sums to witness brutality, not artistry. Their restless murmuring and increasingly aggressive cheers made clear they expected the second contest to deliver the savage entertainment their money had purchased. Marcus, the destroyer, Williams emerged from the fighter's tunnel like a force of nature given human form. At 6'6" and over 300 pounds, he moved with the surprising agility that separated professional athletes from merely large men. His massive frame was covered in scars that told stories of countless brutal encounters, each mark evidence of violence survived and opponents conquered that a former professional wrestler turned bare-knuckle fighter. Marcus had built his reputation on overwhelming power combined with an apparent immunity to pain that made him nearly unstoppable. In underground fighting circuits, his record included victories over dozens of smaller, more technically skilled opponents who discovered that technique meant nothing when facing someone who could absorb their best strikes and respond with devastating force. The weapon selection process became a strategic chess match played before hundreds of spectators. Marcus chose a pair of weighted chains, brutal implements that leveraged his strength advantage into potentially lethal weapons. The chain's reach and momentum could generate tremendous force, capable of shattering bones with a single well-placed strike. Donnie's choice seemed almost modest by comparison. Simple rattan sticks, traditional Eskrima weapons that emphasized speed and precision over raw destructive power. The crowd murmured disapproval at what appeared to be a mismatch. Lightweight sticks against heavy chains wielded by a man who looked capable of breaking opponents with his bare hands. The fight began with Marcus using the chains like medieval flails, generating tremendous rotational force that could have shattered concrete blocks. His technique was crude but devastatingly effective, creating wide arcs of destruction that forced Donnie to maintain constant movement to avoid contact with the weighted ends. Donnie responded with mobility and timing that showcased decades of weapons training, using the Eskrima sticks not just for striking, but for deflecting and redirecting the chain's momentum. Each interception required perfect timing. A fraction of a second too early or late would result in broken bones, or worse, as the battle progressed. Donnie recognized that Marcus's apparent immunity to pain came from heavy drug use rather than natural conditioning. His pupils were dilated beyond what adrenaline could explain. His responses delayed just enough to suggest chemical enhancement that provided endurance and pain tolerance at the cost of tactical thinking and reaction speed. The realization changed Donnie's strategy from pure defense to calculated aggression. Marcus's drug-enhanced state made him powerful but predictable. His enhanced pain tolerance offset by reduced mental acuity that could be exploited through superior tactical thinking. Marcus eventually connected with a chain strike that caught Donnie across the ribs, sending him crashing into the cage wall with enough force to rattle the entire structure. The crowd exploded in excitement, sensing the blood they'd paid to witness as Donnie struggled to regain his footing. But instead of pressing his advantage immediately, Marcus paused to showboat for the cameras, flexing his massive arms and roaring at the audience like a gladiator acknowledging the crowd's bloodlust. Those precious seconds of self-aggrandizement gave Donnie time to recover and reassess, recognizing that his opponent's ego was as exploitable as his drug-impaired judgment. The finish came when Marcus charged forward with both chains spinning in wide, devastating arcs that should have ended the fight decisively, in the extended break before the final fight. Donnie was allowed access to basic medical supplies under the watchful eyes of Miranda's security personnel. The chain strike from Marcus had left deep bruises across his ribs, possibly a hairline fracture, though nothing that would prevent him from continuing. More concerning was the accumulated fatigue from 2 intense battles and the psychological pressure of knowing additional lives depended on his performance in the climactic contest. Jake Patterson approached under the guise of helping with medical supplies, his military bearing evident in the efficient way he assessed Donnie's injuries and provided assistance without unnecessary conversation. His presence seemed natural, another prisoner offering aid to a fellow victim. but his whispered words carried information that transformed everything Donnie thought he understood about their situation. Detective Morrison's recorder contains more than just evidence, Jake murmured while applying antiseptic to a particularly deep cut. Kevin's carrying GPS coordinates and access codes for the network's central database. His father trained him in basic investigative techniques. The kid's been documenting everything for months. The revelation that Kevin Morrison wasn't just a passive victim but an active participant in his father's investigation recontextualized everything Donnie had witnessed. The teenager's apparent victimization had been partly performance, allowing him to gather intelligence while maintaining his cover as Rex's helpless target. Jake continued his whispered briefing while the arena staff prepared for the evening's climactic battle. Detective Morrison's investigation had revealed that the network maintained detailed records of all operations, comprehensive client lists, financial transactions spanning multiple countries, locations of other facilities, and most importantly, evidence of high-level corruption that kept authorities from investigating too closely. The database is stored locally at this facility, Jake explained, his voice barely audible above the crowd's excited anticipation. Morrison memorized the access codes before his capture, but he needed someone on the inside to reach the servers. That's where his son comes in. The family legacy ran deeper than simple law enforcement dedication. Detective Morrison came from multiple generations of police officers who dedicated their lives to fighting organized crime, understanding that corruption and human trafficking represented threats to the fundamental fabric of society that required personal sacrifice to combat effectively. Jake's expression grew dark as he described the champion Donnie would face in the final battle. Victor, the machine Petrov, represented the network's ultimate achievement in human conditioning. A former Spetsnaz operative who'd been captured and systematically broken through months of psychological torture and behavioral modification. They didn't just train him to fight, Jake whispered with what seemed like genuine horror. They erased his personality, his memories, everything that made him human. He's been programmed to kill without hesitation, mercy, or any recognition that his opponents are people rather than obstacles to be eliminated. The technical details Jake provided were chilling in their clinical precision. Victor had been conditioned through a combination of pharmaceutical conditioning, sensory deprivation, and classical conditioning that turned him into the perfect weapon, technically skilled, emotionally dead, and completely loyal to whoever controlled his programming triggers. He's not evil, Jake emphasized as arena preparations intensified around them. He's a victim too, maybe the worst victim of all. But they've programmed him to view combat as problem-solving rather than human interaction. He'll try to kill you not from malice, but because that's what his conditioning tells him victory requires. As guards approached to escort Donnie back to the arena for the climactic battle, Jake's grip on his arm tightened with desperate intensity that seemed completely authentic. Defeating him isn't enough, he warned. You'll have to find a way to reach whatever humanity is left inside him. Because a programmed killer can't be reasoned with or shown mercy, only broken or healed. The arena had been stripped to its essential elements for the final fight. No weapons, no special rules, no safety equipment beyond what was necessary to keep the combatants alive long enough to provide entertainment. Just two men in a cage with several hundred spectators and millions of remote viewers waiting to witness either the triumph of a legend or the brutal destruction of everything he represented. Victor, the machine, Petrov entered through the fighters' tunnel with mechanical precision that immediately set him apart from the previous opponents. Every step was calculated for maximum efficiency, every gesture designed to serve a specific function within his programmed parameters. His face showed no emotion, no anticipation, no human reaction to the crowd's roar. He might as well have been a sophisticated robot designed for a single purpose. The fight began unlike the previous battles, with Victor advancing methodically rather than charging aggressively. He tested Donnie's defenses with surgical precision, each strike designed to either end the fight immediately or gather information for subsequent attacks in a predetermined sequence that left nothing to chance or improvisation. The Victor's combinations were textbook perfect, executed with the emotionless efficiency of someone who'd been programmed rather than trained. His Spetsnaz background showed in his ability to seamlessly blend striking, grappling, and psychological warfare, but all of it felt hollow. Technique without soul, skill without humanity. For the first time all evening, Donnie faced an opponent who matched his technical ability while possessing the physical advantages of youth and military conditioning. Victor's systematic approach created problems that couldn't be solved through experience alone, requiring creative solutions to counter. An opponent who fought like a computer program given human form. The psychological aspect proved most disturbing. Victor spoke throughout the fight in monotone phrases that revealed his conditioning. Target acquired. Resistance parameters noted. Adjusting tactical approach. He viewed Donnie not as a person, but as a problem to be solved through the systematic application of violence. Midway through the battle, Donnie realized that Victor's perfection was also his fundamental weakness. His responses were programmed rather than creative, following predetermined patterns that could be disrupted through unorthodox techniques and unexpected tactical choices. These microsecond hesitations became exploitable openings through a combination of superior experience and tactical creativity that Victor's programming couldn't anticipate. Donnie managed to defeat his opponent using a submission hold that rendered him unconscious without permanent injury. The technique required perfect timing and precision that showcased decades of mastery over both physical skill and moral restraint. The crowd's reaction was distinctly mixed. They'd witnessed technical mastery, but felt somehow cheated by the lack of savage brutality they'd expected from the evening's climax. Their bloodlust remained unsatisfied despite having observed combat at the highest possible level. Miranda stepped into the cage as medical personnel checked Victor's condition, her expression showing satisfaction rather than disappointment at the clinical nature of the final victory. She congratulated Donnie with apparent sincerity and signaled for Detective Morrison's release, seemingly prepared to honor their agreement. But as guards moved toward the prisoner area, Miranda's expression shifted to predatory satisfaction that revealed the evening's true purpose. "There's just one small problem with our agreement," she announced to both Donnie and the crowd, her voice carrying the confidence of someone whose real plan was finally being revealed. The arena lights dimmed slightly as Miranda prepared to explain why Donnie's victories had been meaningless from the beginning, why his legendary skills had only succeeded in providing better entertainment for an audience that had never intended to honor any agreement that might interfere with their profits. Dozens of armed guards flooded the arena as the true scope of Miranda's deception became horrifyingly clear. The wealthy spectators weren't passive observers of an underground fighting exhibition. They were active participants in a human trafficking auction where the prisoners, including Detective Morrison and the rescued students, were being sold to the highest bidders for purposes too horrible to contemplate. Miranda's voice carried the cold satisfaction of someone revealing a masterpiece of manipulation. The entire evening, the fights, the apparent stakes, even the promise of freedom for victory, had been elaborate theater designed to showcase the quality of their products to an international clientele willing to pay premium prices for authentic suffering. "The martial arts schools are merely our recruitment infrastructure," she explained to both Donnie and the cameras broadcasting to remote bidders. "The real business involves providing wealthy clients with experiences ranging from private combat exhibitions to much more specialized entertainment. Your legendary status was meant to add prestige to our catalog." The monitors around the arena now displayed not the prisoners holding areas, but bidding interfaces where clients from around the world competed to purchase human beings. Detective Morrison's law enforcement background made him valuable to clients who derived pleasure from corrupting symbols of authority. The students were categorized by age, appearance, and psychological profile for different types of buyers. Jake Patterson's approach in this moment of maximum despair revealed the ultimate betrayal. His apparent victimization, his military background, his PTSD symptoms, all of it had been expertly crafted performance art designed to gain Donnie's trust and ensure he remained focused on the fights rather than looking for escape routes or security weaknesses. "Every piece of intelligence I provided was carefully crafted misdirection," Jake admitted with professional pride. "Victor's conditioning story was designed to make you hold back during the final fight. The database location I revealed is a trap. Even Detective Morrison's investigation was partially orchestrated to draw federal attention into channels we control. The psychological devastation of Jake's betrayal cut deeper than any physical injury Donnie had sustained during the evening's battles. The man he'd trusted as a fellow victim and potential ally had exploited his warrior's code of protecting those who'd served and suffered, turning compassion into a weapon against everything he represented. Jake's revelation about his fabricated military background was delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who enjoyed causing maximum psychological damage. His PTSD symptoms, his apparent concern for fellow prisoners, his desperate warnings about Victor. All performance designed to manipulate someone whose instincts toward helping others could be exploited for tactical advantage. Victor began to regain consciousness, but instead of showing the effects of defeat, he rose with the same mechanical precision that had defined his fighting style. Jake's story about Victor being a broken victim had been another lie. Victor was a willing participant who viewed his opponents as nothing more than entertainment for his own sadistic pleasure. The facility's transformation from arena to fortress happened with military efficiency. Electronic locks engaged throughout the complex. Armed guards took positions at every potential exit, and surveillance drones began patrolling the airspace around the building. Miranda's preparations for potential rescue attempts were clearly military-grade in their thoroughness and sophistication. The full scope of his situation became clear, surrounded by enemies. His friends being processed for shipment to international buyers. His trust systematically betrayed by someone he'd tried to help. Donnie stood alone in the center of the arena, faced with odds that seemed impossible to overcome. Miranda approached, with Victor flanking her, no longer pretending friendship or professional respect. "The legend of Donnie Yen ends tonight," she announced to the crowd whose bloodlust had transformed into something even more sinister. "But first, let's see how long that legendary composure lasts when we start with the youngest prisoner." On the monitors surrounding the arena, guards dragged Kevin Morrison toward a separate chamber as his terrified screams echoed through the sound system for the entertainment of clients who'd paid extra to witness the psychological destruction of heroes who dared to oppose their will. The arena filled with anticipation as guards dragged Kevin Morrison to a transparent chamber. Miranda's voice carried cold satisfaction. "Every legend needs a tragic ending. Let's see how quickly yours breaks." But Donnie underwent a fundamental transformation. The betrayal and threats stripped away hesitation. For the first time, the legendary martial artist stopped holding back, accessing decades of training and experience. His movement style shifted completely. Gone was defensive technique. What emerged was primal, unstoppable force. Victor stepped forward for the real battle, but quickly realized he faced a different opponent entirely. Victor fell to accumulated perfection, dozens of precise techniques that shut down his fighting ability. Donnie stood breathing heavily but unbroken, his legendary status finally matching reality. Victor lay unconscious, but Donnie focused on Kevin trapped in the chamber. Miranda threatened execution unless he surrendered, fundamentally misunderstanding what she faced. "True martial arts isn't about being strongest," Donnie said quietly. "It's about being strong enough to protect those who need it." His assault began systematically, disabling communications, targeting infrastructure. Jake approached confidently, expecting broken surrender, but encountered someone beyond personal hurt, focused entirely on protecting innocence. Victor regained consciousness changed. "They made me forget who I was," he said in his authentic voice. His conditioning was broken, revealing Ukrainian origins and genuine humanity beneath programmed responses. Alarms blared. Donnie stood surrounded by disabled equipment. Miranda backed away, realizing the legend had become something far more dangerous than imagined. The facility descended into chaos as Donnie's systematic assault cascaded through operations. Victor struggled up, speaking authentically. "My name is Volodymyr. Ukrainian Special Forces before they captured me." Together, they freed prisoners while neutralizing guards. Victor's insider knowledge combined with Donnie's mastery created unstoppable force for liberation. Miranda retreated to the holding area with remaining guards and a detonator. "This facility is rigged with explosives. Let me escape with core prisoners or everyone dies." The key came through understanding. Miranda was a victim too, broken by the system. "Becoming what hurt you doesn't heal wounds," Donnie said compassionately. Her facade cracked. years of pain pouring out. In that vulnerability, Victor moved with gentle precision, disarming her while Donnie secured the detonator. With Miranda neutralized, remaining security collapsed. Victor and Donnie freed dozens of prisoners held for months as training materials for wealthy clients. Detective Morrison revealed his investigation was part of a larger federal task force. Kevin's recorder contained coordinates for similar facilities across 3 states, enabling simultaneous raids crippling the entire organization. Victor's technical knowledge restored communications for legitimate purposes. Federal agents coordinated the largest trafficking bust in California history. The database contained staggering information, client lists including politicians and celebrities, financial records worth hundreds of millions, video evidence of corruption that had protected their operations. As dawn broke, Donnie stood with the Morrisons watching survivors receive proper medical care. Justice was served, but real healing work was just beginning for victims whose trauma would take years to overcome. Dawn broke over the warehouse as federal agents coordinated the largest trafficking bust in California history. Agent Sarah Chun briefed assembled personnel. Simultaneous raids across 3 states resulted in over 300 arrests and rescued additional victims. Donnie managed media interviews to focus on survivors rather than his heroic actions, using celebrity status to educate about trafficking warning signs. Miranda's cooperation with prosecutors revealed international connections, helping dismantle operations in 12 countries. Victor faced complex legal questions as both perpetrator and victim. Immigration officials worked to restore his identity, while prosecutors considered his involuntary conditioning. The student survivors began psychological recovery with trauma specialists. 3 weeks later, Donnie visited the courthouse where Miranda faced arraignment. Walking with Detective Morrison and Kevin, the father-son team expressed profound gratitude for restoring faith that individual actions could defeat systematic evil. 1 month later, Donnie returned to Riverside Commons. The former studio stood empty, but renovation sounds echoed from adjacent space where something positive was being built. The new school represented collaborative effort between community organizations and federal services. Victor volunteered, time designing protocols emphasizing mental health alongside physical techniques. Donnie worked with instructors, sharing philosophical foundations preventing martial arts from becoming dominance tools. Each survivor received personalized attention, helping reclaim martial arts as positive force rather than source of fear. Detective Morrison joined a federal task force focusing on trafficking through youth programs. Kevin often accompanied him, educating young people about recognizing predatory behavior. As opening ceremony concluded, Kevin asked to keep learning. Donnie's response captured authentic mentorship. True mastery means developing wisdom to know when to fight, show mercy, or walk away. 3 months later, the school's grand opening drew hundreds celebrating transformation from corruption to healing. Kevin emerged as natural leader, his confidence grown through mastering himself and protecting others needing support. Victor received special immigration status, working with federal task force as trafficking consultant. His unique background proved invaluable in training law enforcement to recognize victim conditioning techniques. Lisa returned to college focusing on criminal justice, while Tommy and Brad helped students who'd experienced trauma. The Riverside model became a template studied nationwide for community-based oversight of youth programs. Miranda's plea agreement avoided death penalty charges in exchange for testimony against international networks. Her cooperation helped rescue hundreds of additional victims across 12 countries. As celebration continued with families enjoying legitimate demonstrations, Donnie watched Kevin patiently instructing a shy new student, ensuring positive mentorship cycles would continue, protecting future generations from predators. 6 months later, Donnie returned for the first belt testing ceremony. Students demonstrated not just technical skills, but character development, helping newer practitioners and understanding when to use physical abilities versus seeking alternatives. Kevin, now assistant instructor, taught elementary children while demonstrating advanced techniques with fluid confidence. Movements aren't just self-defense, he explained. They're about finding balance and having confidence without putting others down. Victor delivered a speech in careful English. Second, chances are precious gifts. We honor them by protecting others from similar suffering. Updates revealed complete network destruction with over 400 convictions worldwide that AS students received belts. Donnie reflected on the difference between movie martial arts and reality. Real work began after dramatic confrontations through patient healing and community protection. Kevin approached with gratitude. Donnie's response embodied authentic martial arts. True strength means being strong enough to protect those who need it. You've learned that better than any technique. Walking away, the legend continued through quiet courage protecting those needing help most. If you like the story, please watch another story on our channel and subscribe to the channel.